We live in a world where hustle is glorified, but direction is ignored. Where people praise how early you wake up, how many hours you grind, how many plates you spin, yet never stop to ask, but where are you going? See, there's a difference between motion and mission, between noise and navigation, between running in circles and walking with purpose. Just because you're moving doesn't mean you're growing. Just because you're tired doesn't mean you've been productive. You can be exhausted and still lost. You can be active and still aimless. Don't confuse movement with progress. Don't mistake being busy for being aligned. Every day you wake up and put your feet on the ground, God gives you 24 hours, not to just move through them, but to master them. But mastery requires clarity. It requires purpose. It requires pause. Some of you are afraid to pause because you think if you slow down, you'll fall behind. But what if the pause is the very thing you need to realign? What if the silence you avoid is where God is speaking? What if the stillness you resist is the training ground for your next breakthrough? The enemy's greatest weapon in this generation is distraction. Because if he can't destroy you, he'll make you too distracted to be effective. You see people chasing money, chasing validation, chasing followers, chasing the next big thing. But here's the truth. If you don't know who you are, everything you chase will only lead you further away from your core. And the more you move without direction, the more you start to wear a mask of achievement while dying inside from confusion. Some of you are so busy proving yourself, you forgot to check in with your soul. You've become addicted to the grind, but allergic to growth. You filled your calendar, but emptied your spirit. And now you're wondering why you still feel unfulfilled. Let me say this as clearly as I can. Busyness does not mean you're becoming. God didn't call you to be frantic. He called you to be fruitful. He didn't say, run around. He said, be still and know. He didn't design you to be stretched thin. He designed you to be strategic. There is a quiet strength in intentionality. There is a power in pace. And there is wisdom in knowing when to stop doing everything so you can start doing the right thing. Have you ever looked at a hamster wheel? That thing spins fast, real fast. But here's the thing, it's going nowhere. A blur of motion with zero destination. That's what many people's lives look like today. Fast-paced, constant activity, no real progress. And because it feels like work, they convince themselves it must be working. But feelings lie, speed lies, busyness lies. The only thing that tells the truth is results. And results only come from clarity, consistency, and alignment. If you don't take control of your direction, the world will assign one for you. It'll tell you what success looks like. It'll tell you how fast you should be moving. It'll tell you that if you're not constantly doing something, you're falling behind. But let me tell you something real. Progress without peace is not progress. If you're gaining money but losing your mind, that's not success. If you're growing your brand but killing your spirit, that's not growth. If you're impressing the world but neglecting your soul, that's not winning. That's slow suicide. And God didn't breathe life into you for you to exist in that kind of chaos. You've got to learn to be intentional with your time, your focus, your effort. Because life is not a sprint. It's a series of deliberate steps, taken with conviction, guided by purpose, sustained by faith. Some people are addicted to chaos because it makes them feel important. They confuse being needed with being purposeful. They chase opportunities they were never called to, just so they can feel like they're doing something big. But big doesn't mean blessed. Loud doesn't mean lasting. Seen doesn't mean significant. The enemy would love for you to be busy. He loves to see you grind yourself into exhaustion because he knows if he can't steal your soul, he can at least distract your purpose. He'll keep you reacting instead of planning, rushing instead of reflecting, doing instead of becoming. But God doesn't operate in panic. He operates in purpose. And when your life starts moving too fast for your soul to catch up, it's time to pause. Not to quit, not to give up, but to realign. Ask yourself this: what are you really chasing? Is it a title, a platform, a feeling? Are you so caught up in what's next that you're ignoring what's now? Because what you refuse to face in stillness will eventually catch up to you in burnout. The unaddressed becomes the unseen enemy. That's why you've got to slow down and take inventory. Who are you becoming? What are you sacrificing? Where are you heading? And don't just ask yourself those questions once. Ask them daily. Ask them honestly. Because your future is not built on busyness. It's built on alignment, on knowing what's for you and what's not, on walking with God, not ahead of Him, not behind Him, with Him, step by step, day by day, purposefully, quietly, boldly. There comes a point where you've got to stop asking, "Am I doing enough?" and start asking, "Am I doing what matters?" Because let me tell you something powerful. Not every opportunity is for you. Not every open door is divine. Some open doors are distractions dressed up like blessings. Some opportunities are traps that look like trophies. And if you're not clear on who you are and where you're going, you'll say yes to everything and end up nowhere. You'll pour your energy into things that drain you instead of build you. And you'll wake up one day wondering how you got so far off track. God didn't create you to be everywhere at once. That's His job. Your job is to be where He placed you, doing what He assigned you, with excellence, with integrity, with discipline. That's real power. That's real purpose. But that takes maturity. It takes restraint. It takes the courage to say no when everything around you says you should. You have to protect your mission from the noise. You have to protect your mind from the pressure. Because busyness will always try to convince you it's a badge of honor. But wisdom knows that stillness is strength. Some of the most powerful people you'll ever meet don't move fast. They move intentionally. They're not loud. They're disciplined. They don't chase everything. They guard their energy. And it's not because they're lazy. It's because they're focused. They've learned that it's better to master one thing than to be mediocre at 20. They've learned that presence beats performance, that peace beats pressure, that legacy beats popularity. Let me ask you something. When's the last time you stopped to evaluate your steps? When's the last time you asked God, "Is this where you want me? Is this still aligned with your plan? Or have I drifted into distraction?" Because movement without prayer is motion without meaning. It's hustle without holiness. And sooner or later, it runs dry. You can grind yourself into the ground and still miss your God-given assignment if you're not in tune with the one who assigned it. Don't let that be you. Don't let your life become a blur of busyness with no breakthrough. Don't let the culture of go, go, go rob you of the clarity that only comes when you pause. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop, to rest, to reflect, to realign. Because when God gives you a vision, He's not in a rush. He's in control. And when you walk with Him, you stop needing to prove yourself to everybody else. Let me tell you this. There is a difference between being driven and being directed. Some people are driven by ego, by fear, by insecurity, by pressure. They're running from something, not towards something. But when you're directed by God, there's peace in your pace. There's clarity in your steps. There's power in your patience. You're not trying to force open doors. You're waiting on the ones that align with your purpose. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's a person who's learned to trust divine timing more than personal timelines. You see, this world will always try to rush you. It'll convince you that you're behind, that someone else is doing more, that you've got to catch up. But what you don't see is that many of those people you're comparing yourself to, they're lost. Loud, but lost. Busy, but broken. Successful on paper, but shattered in private. And the tragedy isn't that they failed. The tragedy is they never paused long enough to realize they were succeeding at the wrong thing. So ask yourself, what is all your movement building? What is all your striving producing? Are you growing in spirit? Are you walking in purpose? Or are you just accumulating achievements that don't feed your soul? Because you can climb the ladder all you want, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, you're still going nowhere. You've got to recenter, reconnect, and realign with what really matters. Because you know what I've learned? Sometimes God will slow you down on purpose, not to punish you, but to protect you. Sometimes He'll close a door, not because you're not ready, but because the room you were about to walk into wasn't ready for the version of you He's developing. Sometimes He delays what you thought was next, because what's next would have crushed you without the foundation He's trying to lay right now. That's not a step back. That's divine strategy. And when you understand that, you stop fighting the pause. You start embracing it. You start leaning into stillness with faith, not fear. You stop measuring your worth by how much you produce and start measuring it by how much you're aligned. Because purpose doesn't come from pressure. It comes from presence. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop, breathe, listen, and move only when God says, now. You ever sit down at the end of a long day, tired to your bones, and still feel like you didn't do anything that really mattered? That's not laziness. That's misalignment. That's your spirit trying to get your attention, trying to tell you you're moving, but not toward what matters. That's the ache of wasted energy. And if you don't listen to it, that ache becomes a lifestyle. A life where you're always chasing, always doing, always striving, yet never arriving. See, this world doesn't reward rest. It rewards results. But results without restoration will ruin you. If you want to last, you've got to learn when to withdraw. Even Jesus withdrew. He preached to crowds, but He prayed in private. He healed others, but He paused with God. That's your blueprint. You're not superhuman. You can't give from an empty cup. You can't pour out every day without being poured into. And some of y'all are trying to run on yesterday's faith, last year's clarity, and wonder why your spirit's dry. It's because you're mistaking motion for momentum. You're counting calendar events like they're trophies. But what about impact? What about purpose? What about depth? You're showing up everywhere, but are you present anywhere? You're crossing tasks off a list, but are you connected to what they mean? Progress is not about quantity. It's about quality. It's about intention. It's about showing up where it matters, how it matters, and why it matters. And let me drop this on you. Your calling does not compete with your peace. If it's draining you without direction, you need to reevaluate it. If the hustle is louder than the voice of God in your life, it's time to turn down the volume. Because there is a rhythm to destiny. And that rhythm is not rushed. It's not chaotic. It's not scattered. It's steady. And you only find that rhythm when you stop being addicted to movement and start getting addicted to meaning. Let me tell you something that might sting a little. Some of you are stuck not because you're not working hard, but because you're working on the wrong things. You've been moving so fast, doing so much, that you haven't stopped long enough to ask, is this even taking me closer to who I want to become? Just because it feels urgent doesn't mean it's important. And just because it looks productive doesn't mean it's purposeful. There is no prize for burnout. There is no trophy for exhaustion. And there's no glory in going in circles while convincing yourself it's progress. You ever notice how easy it is to get caught up in the grind, but how hard it is to hear God when your mind is loud with lists? That's no coincidence. The enemy loves a noisy life, because the louder your schedule, the quieter your spirit. And the quieter your spirit, the harder it is to discern what's divine and what's just distraction dressed up like opportunity. That's why you need to slow down, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Because only in stillness do you find the clarity that leads to conviction. There's a reason God speaks in whispers. It's not because he's distant, it's because he wants you close. And when you live in constant movement, you forget how to hear, you forget how to discern, you forget how to be. So many people live their entire lives in motion, but never discover who they truly are. They become performers, runners, chasers, but not becomers. And you weren't made to perform. You weren't made to impress. You were made to become. So the question isn't, what are you doing? The question is, who are you becoming through what you're doing? Are you building a life, or are you just filling up time? Are you feeding your soul, or are you numbing your emptiness with activity? Because one day all the noise will stop. One day all the busyness will end. And when that day comes, the only thing that will matter is what remains. The fruit of your faith, the impact of your obedience, the quiet strength of a life lived on purpose. You want to know what separates people who rise from people who run in place? It's not their grind, it's their guidance. It's not how much they hustle, it's how clearly they hear. And when you're aligned with something bigger than yourself, you don't have to force momentum. You don't have to manufacture opportunities. You just walk in obedience, and the doors open when they're supposed to. But you've got to get out of your own way long enough to hear what God is actually saying, not just what your ego wants to hear. See, the most dangerous form of busyness is when it feels productive, but has no purpose. It's like rocking in a chair. You're moving, but you're not going anywhere. And that's what happens when you start confusing movement with meaning. When your calendar is packed, but your heart is empty. When your phone doesn't stop ringing, but your spirit hasn't heard from God in weeks. That's not growth. That's noise. That's distraction. That's the enemy playing dress up in the costume of success. And some of y'all have been there, running meetings, closing deals, showing up for everybody but yourself. And deep down, you feel it, that ache, that internal whisper that says, there's more. Not more money, not more status, but more peace, more clarity, more alignment, more truth. And you know what? That whisper isn't weakness. That's your soul crying out for depth, for substance, for something real in a world full of highlight reels. But let me be clear. This isn't an excuse to sit back and wait for life to happen. This isn't permission to procrastinate. This is a call to prioritize, to move with vision, to wake up and realize that every step you take either brings you closer to your purpose or farther from it. And if you don't know your purpose, then your first assignment is to get quiet enough to find it. Because when you know what matters, you stop chasing what doesn't. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You stop overcommitting to prove your worth. And you start walking with clarity, with focus, with fire, not to impress others, but to honor your assignment, to protect your anointing, to fulfill the reason God put you here. This is your wake-up call. Not to hustle harder, not to add more noise to your day, but to pause and ask yourself, where is all this taking me? Because life is not about how fast you can go. It's about how far you can grow. And growth doesn't happen in chaos. It doesn't happen when your soul is always in survival mode. It happens in clarity, in obedience, in quiet, powerful steps, in the direction of your calling. Some of you are carrying dreams so big, so bold, so deeply planted by God, but you're letting them get buried under the weight of busyness. You've been so caught up in keeping up that you forgot to slow down and build up. But let me tell you something. God is not calling you to perform. He's calling you to transform, to become, to evolve. And transformation doesn't happen at the speed of culture. It happens at the speed of surrender. You've got to surrender the idea that success is about always doing. Sometimes the strongest move is to be still. Sometimes progress means pruning. Sometimes moving forward means letting go of the things that look impressive but keep you bound. And if you're brave enough to pause, to reflect, to recalibrate, God will redirect your steps with clarity, with peace, with power. He'll take your movement and turn it into meaning. So don't confuse busy with blessed. Don't confuse motion with mission. Don't confuse constant with called. Real progress is not about how much you carry. It's about how intentionally you walk, step by step, truth by truth, purpose over pressure, peace over performance, vision over vanity. And when you move like that, oh, the world will notice. Not because you're shouting, but because your life starts speaking louder than any words. Your peace becomes a message. Your focus becomes a force. Your alignment becomes unstoppable. So the next time someone tells you, you've got to keep moving, tell them this: I don't just move, I move with meaning. I don't just hustle, I'm guided. I don't just show up, I show up with purpose. And if that means fewer steps, fewer meetings, fewer distractions, so be it. Because you've stopped chasing movement and you've started building momentum. This is your moment. Own it. Guard it. Align it. Because progress is not about speed, it's about truth. And when you walk in truth, there's no limit to where you'll go. Now breathe, refocus, and move with purpose. Because you're not here to stay busy. You're here to build something eternal. And that takes clarity. That takes courage. That takes you. If you made it this far, drop 100 in the comments so I know you're part of the 1% who's serious about growth.